Recording. Okay, got it. All right. So, hello everybody. I start from the beginning. I don't know. Hold on. Resume slideshow. There we go. Sorry. Okay. Hello everybody. I'm Debbie Lucas. I'm the dietitian. Linda has been kind enough to set up this meeting so that I can record this, because as it turns out, I'm double booked tomorrow on Tuesday. I had hand surgery. You can see my little weird hand thing. And they just scheduled me a time to change my bandage, and no one's called me back to see if I could reschedule, so I'm going to be stuck going. So Linda has agreed to record this, so I'm going to do my talk that I was going to do tomorrow, which is where are your micronutrients? So welcome. And I hope everybody's doing great and you survived Halloween and are now ready to move into really that holiday eating season we've talked about before. But today we're going to talk specifically about micronutrients for the most part. And this was in large part because the students you've been working for, the dietetic students you've been working with there, did a survey and to see what you wanted to learn and what you wanted to know about. And one of the things was you wanted to know more about the micronutrients. So after this lesson, if there's still things you need to know specifically, please let me know. My email is right on here. You can feel free to always email me and say, hey, I wish you'd talk about this or that or the other, because I do run out of ideas. So anything that you let me know, I'd be happy to work on or research. So let's get going. I'm not sure how long it'll take. So first of all, November 1st today, happy vegan month. Today is actually vegan day, I think, but all month is vegan month. So if we were doing this together, I'd be asking you how you've been doing eating more plants or less animals. Got any new recipes you've been trying? How are you doing with the SMART goals? I think most every lesson we talk about SMART goals being specific and measurable and achievable and realistic and time bound. And so I like to talk to you about that. So since I'm not there, hopefully you'll be talking with somebody or talking with the students or Linda or Mary or anyone who's there about how you're doing with your goals. One thing I did want to throw in there that was a little off topic was last time I was down at Sac State, which was a couple weeks ago, a few of us were talking about French onion soup, and I've been dying to make some French onion soup. And so I just wanted to report back that yes, I did that. And it actually turned out great. I haven't had French onion soup in years because it's usually made with beef broth and tons of cheese. And so it was actually really good. And someone had asked me last time I was there, what do you substitute for that beefiness? And really the beefiness is that umami flavor that gives it a richness. And so I used vegetable broth for it, and of course tons of onions. And then, and this was John's suggestion, which was a great one, is I soaked some dried shiitake mushrooms, and that liquid that it creates, as they rehydrated, I used that as part of my liquid along with the vegetable broth. And my recipe actually called for white wine. I don't have any white wine in the house because we're more red wine drinkers. And so I looked at a number of recipes, and somebody said to try a little brandy. So I did a little splash of brandy in it, but it was very good. And I'd gotten a great, really dense whole grain bread at the farmer's market on Saturday. So I put that on top of it. And then, they always call for cheese. And I thought about just skipping the cheese, but we got a new Trader Joe's in our town. And so I went and got one of their vegan cheeses. And it's like the Trader Joe's brand, I think. And I got Parmesan cheese. And it was very good, flavorful and tasty. And it did melt, but it didn't stretch. Like you want that gooey stretching, and it doesn't do that, but you don't need it. It was actually very good. So thank you for the brainstorming we did when I was there a couple of weeks ago, because that was really nice. And then my other thing I wanted to report back on was when I did the talk for the Gero 101 class the other day, we had talked about Cheerios lowering cholesterol. And I said, oh yeah, there have been studies on Cheerios. And, I might have thought, oh my gosh, did I speak too soon? But I've looked back, and there are actually a few studies that do show that Cheerios helps to lower your cholesterol, like 10% lowers your LDL, which I think is pretty substantial. But I think oats are probably a better source of food. And I don't know the difference, how much that will lower it compared to Cheerios, but oats are going to be higher in fiber, better for your gut microbiome, make you feel more full. So if you like just plain old oats, I'd go that route instead. Okay, so there we go. It's also diabetes month. So next time I talk, we'll talk a little more about diabetes. Okay, so micronutrients. So when you think about what's best for our heart or even just our overall good health, as you know, we're all promoting this whole food plant-based eating style. It's been the only plan that's really been shown to reverse chronic disease like heart disease and diabetes. And so how that looks, you see my plates pretty much every time I talk. It's fruits and vegetables on half your plate, whole grains. The protein is just legumes or nuts. There's no dairy. I like the one here to the right. It just gives you a few more specifics. But we can rest assured that when we're eating this way, or we're moving towards that eating style, we're going to get all our nutrients. So we'll talk about a few specific nutrients of concern. But it's funny when you tell people I'm going to go vegan or I'm going to eat plant-based, they always say, well, number one, where are you going to get your protein? And number two is, how do you know you're going to get all your nutrition? Yet nobody says, how are you going to get your nutrition if you're eating the standard American diet, which is, McDonald's and fast food and processed foods. And that one is lacking a lot of nutrients, except for calories. So we definitely can get them. We'll talk more specifically about some of the nutrients that are not concerning, but ones that we just want to be aware of on a completely plant-based diet. So the nutrients in your whole food plant-based diet, that's what my WFPB is. The macronutrients are the things that provide calories, and they're needed in larger amounts. So carbohydrates, we all know, carbs, protein, and fat. Those are the three things that provide calories. And actually, alcohol isn't on my list, even though it provides calories, because by definition, a nutrient is something that helps your body and helps to heal your body and helps to grow new tissue and things. And alcohol is the complete opposite of what a nutrient is. So while it does provide calories, we're not counting it on my list. So we got our carbs, our grains, our fruits and veggies, our beans, the mainstay of a whole food diet. And then we're throwing our protein in, our beans and legumes, nuts and seeds. And that would include soy there too. And then we've got our fats. That would be, we encourage more whole fats like avocado as opposed to the avocado oil, or olives as opposed to the olive oil. Nuts and seeds work there too. So those are our macronutrients needed in larger amounts. And then we've got micronutrients and water. So they're needed in small amounts, but just as important. So our vitamins help get energy from our macros. It helps, and it's funny that I wrote macros there because that's what everybody talks about. If you're watching any programs on diets or all the fad diets, everybody's worried about their macros. Well, now you know what your macros are. We're just going to eat our food and our macros will be just fine. But we do need these micronutrients that, like vitamins, to help get the energy from those. They help with different functions in the body. There's 13 vitamins. These are things that you have to get from your diet. If you don't get them in your diet, you become deficient in them. Our body won't make them for the most part. Then there's minerals. These also are a micronutrient, but they provide more structure. So our bones and teeth are calcium. I mean, they contain a lot of calcium. Minerals can also be found in our body fluids, and there's 16 minerals. And then water is important for all the body functions we have. 60% of our body is water, more or less. As we get older, we actually get a little less water in our bodies. Okay, so to maximize our micronutrients, to make sure we're getting all the nutrients we need, if we're following a whole food plant-based diet, we want to eat real foods, not food products. Eat plant foods, not things that were made in a plant. So the trouble with our typical American diet is so many things are processed to death that we do lose a lot of the micronutrients. In fact, for some of them, we lose so many that by law, they have to add some back in. So if we eat the whole real food in the first place, we're going to be doing better. So fruits, vegetables, beans, nuts and grains, whole intact, nuts and seeds, whole intact grains, so whole like rolled oats as opposed to cocoa pebbles, and herbs and spices. So these are our foods. They're going to provide us with loads of micronutrients that we're going to need. So here's just a little pictorial of what our vitamins are. So our vitamins are divided into two groups. We've got water-soluble vitamins there on the left, fat-soluble vitamins there on the right. The fat-soluble vitamins, A, D, E, and K, need to have a little fat in order to be well absorbed, and they need a little fat to travel around in our body. The ones on the left, the water-soluble vitamins, we've got vitamin C, and then we've got a number of B vitamins. Those are water-soluble, meaning that if you have too much of those, you're going to basically pee it out. So you might recognize some of these names: the thiamine, riboflavin, niacin, biotin, pantothenic acid, vitamin B6, folate, vitamin B12. Now you notice that they don't go like, there's all these vitamins, but they don't go in numerical order. We're missing a few. It's because back in the day when they discovered what vitamins even were, they kept numbering them, and then they realized some things weren't truly a vitamin. If our body can make it, it's not an essential vitamin. So that's why you see numbers missing. But we're going to talk just about a specific few of those. And here's our minerals. The major minerals are the ones that are in the largest amounts in our body: sodium, potassium, chloride, calcium, phosphorus, magnesium, and sulfur. And then on the right, we've got our trace minerals, meaning they're just as important, but needed in smaller amounts: iron, copper, zinc, selenium, iodine, chromium, fluoride, manganese, and molybdenum. That's a tough one. Molybdenum. Okay, say that 6 times fast. But we're not going to talk about all these because I would definitely put you to sleep. So I'm going to talk about the ones that seem to be the most concerning as we age and in a whole food plant-based diet. Now this, I'll give Linda the slide so you can use this link if you want to, but if you're wondering how much do I need of each of these, you can go to this little calculator online and you put in your age and your height and your weight, and it calculates and will let you know how much you need of all those. I'm also going to send with my slides to Linda a sheet that prints out how much you need of each of those things. That is just in general. This one will do it actually specific for your height and weight and age and everything. So if you're wondering, you can do that. You don't really have to really count the numbers. We just need to eat enough food to maintain a healthy weight and eat whole real foods, and we're going to be good. But I will send those to Linda so that you can have those. So the whole food plant-based diet, the nutrients that are of most concern, I guess, that we need to be aware of. A lot of times you'll hear it as a challenge, nutrients that are challenging. And I don't think they're challenging. We just need to be aware. So vitamin B12, it's only in animal products. So if we don't need animal products, it's something we got to think about how we're going to get. Vitamin D, most of our sources are also animal products. So how are we going to get it? Calcium, iron, zinc, iodine, all available in our plant forms without much problem. But if we don't have a well-balanced diet, we might be missing some of those. But these are the ones we generally hear about. So B12, we'll talk about how much you need is the RDA, the recommended dietary allowance. This is in micrograms, meaning it's super small amount, 2.4. B12 is very important because it helps make red blood cells, it helps with our DNA, and it's important for nerve function. So we are at risk for a deficiency as we get older because we're not able to utilize the B12 in our foods as well. And if we're a vegan, because we're not eating anything really that has a lot of B12 in it. So it's mostly in animal products. A sign of a deficiency is you might get tingling in your fingers or your feet, numbness, fatigue, memory loss, and falling is a real red flag. Because what B12 does is it's involved in making the little sheath, the covering of our nerves. So if we don't have enough, it causes nerve damage. And we can't go back and make up what we lost. So we want to make sure that we're maintaining this B12. Now, even though this is a B vitamin, our body holds on to some of it. But so it does store a little bit, but not a ton of it. So it is a concern for people who don't eat any animal products to make sure they get B12. Another note is if you have diabetes or even prediabetes, you're often prescribed a medication called Metformin. It's also called glucophage. This has been associated with lower B12 levels. So somebody who's been on been on Metformin, usually every 3 years at least, we check B12 levels. And if we have some of those signs of deficiency, we check it more often than that. The cure is to take a B12 supplement. And this is one of the really easy things to do. It's not made by plants or animals, only by microbes. So it's like in the dirts and things. So our food sources are fortified foods or animal products. And if you're doing plant-based and you're doing soy milk or almond milk, they're fortified with vitamin B12. But we often don't drink like 3 glasses a day. So this is one where you really do need to supplement. I mean, it's just that simple. And you know, they recommend this for people even who aren't on a whole food plant-based diet as we get older. So you can supplement with about 2,000 micrograms a week. They sell these, sorry, that MCG is the same as my little UG up there at the top, which is a huge amount compared to what the daily amount is. But they sell it sublingual, so it seems to be absorbed better when it's mixed with your saliva. And it's the type of B12 is I can't say it now, cyanobalamin. Now, if you're over 65, they're recommending 1,000 micrograms a day. So I take one that's 3,000. I take it once a week, but when I turn 65, which is not all that far off, I'll probably add another one so that I'll make sure I have enough. So B12 is concerning. That's the one we really should supplement. Okay, calcium. The RDA is 1,200 milligrams a day for men. Sorry, for women, men and women, and for men 51 to 70, it's 1,000. So the thing with calcium is that 99% of the calcium we have in our bodies is in our bones and teeth. But 1%, which you think like, oh, that's not very much, is important for life-altering functions. Muscle contraction, nerve function, blood clotting, blood pressure. So if we're going through life and not taking in enough calcium, and then our body needs that 1% gets a little low. So our body makes withdrawals from our savings account, which is in our bones. So if we keep going by making these withdrawals and not making deposits, our sign of deficiency is weak, brittle bones, which is osteoporosis. People who are at risk for deficiency in calcium are during growth periods, like kids and teenagers when they're growing. The elderly, low calcium and vitamin D intake, so if we don't have much, if we have a sedentary lifestyle, because interestingly, our bones stay healthier when we do weight-bearing exercise. So if we just sit around all day, that doesn't help our bones be stronger. And women, we're at higher risk, although men get osteoporosis too. So one thing to think about calcium is that I told you, eat all kinds of greens. I'm always telling you, eat greens, but they contain oxalates that can actually inhibit the absorption of calcium. So not all the greens. So kale, collards, mustard greens, the calcium is very well absorbed. Spinach, chard, rhubarb, and beet greens. And I know John's thinking, we can't eat rhubarb greens because those will kill you. He's right, that they're toxic. So sorry, John, I meant to fix that. So spinach, chard, beet grains, it's not well absorbed. That doesn't mean spinach isn't any good for you. It did Popeye good. It's got tons of iron in it. It's just not going to give you loads of calcium. So it's good if you're a greens eater, and I hope you are, that you intermingle all your greens. Like sometimes have spinach, sometimes have kale, sometimes have collards, have different kinds. So generally our food sources are dairy products, but and that is well absorbed, but there are a lot of plant sources too. Now, some of the research on vegans shows that if they get at least 600 milligrams, notice the RDA was 1200, if we get at least 600, then the studies have shown vegans don't have any higher risk of fracture than non-vegans. But where are we going to get it? So I got a little source chart here. So if we're doing plant-based milks, those are mostly fortified, but check, look on your label to make sure that it says it's got calcium in it. We can also do fortified orange juice, but for many reasons, a lot of us aren't drinking much juice. You could do different fortified foods, like some energy bars and things have it. There's your greens, certain types of tofu, not all tofu, but there is some tofu that is set to make it like a little tofu cake with a calcium product. So that might have it. Blackstrap molasses. And then we get to the more moderate amounts like soybeans, soy nuts, instant oatmeal because they add things to it. Your regular oats don't. Almond butter, tahini, that's the ground up sesame seed paste. There's some more greens, bok choy, edamame. Tempeh is a fermented soybean. Figs, textured vegetable protein, or those soy curls would have some. Chia seeds. And then we've got broccoli, beans, oranges, almonds, flax seeds, all have some. The thing is, we don't always eat so many of that it's going to even add up to our 600. So you just want to be aware of getting a variety of foods throughout the day. And if you don't think you're going to be getting at least 600, you might consider a calcium supplement, but only take it on days you think I really didn't get quite enough. And there's many other factors involved with osteoporosis, like we mentioned. It's exercise. So weight-bearing exercise you all do and are going to do great. Not overdoing alcohol, different things that are going to help make sure your bones are healthy. Now, vitamin D, we've talked about this a few times. It's really come out in the news the last few years, how it seems to be associated with so many chronic diseases. But with COVID, it came out that people who were deficient in vitamin D may have had a higher risk of developing COVID. So it helps with our bone health because it helps make sure the calcium is doing its thing. So if you don't have enough vitamin D, you get bone loss, so lose calcium from your bones, osteomalacia, which is weak bones, like in rickets, called rickets in kids. So, when you see the, like my grandfather, I think he had rickets when he was a kid because his legs always bowed a lot. So rickets is when your bones aren't strong enough to hold your weight and they bow out. So there's vitamin D2 and vitamin D3. I actually do take a vitamin D. The 2 is plant-based, and the vitamin D3 is from lanolin, which is sheep's wool. But they do really recommend taking the D3 because it seems to be the one that's most associated with decreasing chronic disease risk. And so they do make a vegan D3. I get mine at Sprouts. I'm sure you can get it online or anywhere. But ever since COVID, I really started taking a D3. I take it every other day. Because the sources are sunlight, but I wear tons of sunscreen, so my skin isn't doing its conversion to vitamin D very well. It's in fatty fish, it's in eggs, it is in our fortified foods, and interestingly, mushrooms, because they are putting lights on the mushrooms and they're retaining some of the vitamin D. I'll have a little slide on that. So how much sunlight do you need? Well, if you are in LA or further south, 15 minutes a day, or 30 minutes for darker skin or elderly. And if you're further north than LA, or you're dark skinned, or you have a lot of winter months, you might need to supplement. So that I do. There's also an association of having adequate vitamin D and less progression of type 2 diabetes. So what the heck? Here's the mushrooms. This is just fascinating to me. So they show the mushrooms and the ones that have been exposed to this UV light and ones that haven't. So if you just get your regular white little button mushrooms, they don't really have a whole lot going on in the vitamin D department. But when you get the ones that have exposed to UV light, you have like more than you need of the RDA. So I have noticed, and you know, I forgot to ask at the farmer's market, I might have asked before and I've already forgotten, if theirs have been exposed. And I want to say, when I asked last time, they were. But ask it at your farmer's market, and sometimes you'll see it in the little packages you get at the stores too. So if you like mushrooms, you're going to eat them anyway. Might as well get ones that are exposed to vitamin D. Now, iron, we don't need a whole lot of iron, 8 milligrams. For women who are still menstruating, they actually need 18. But this is important for our red blood cells that carry oxygen to our muscle tissues. It's important for immunity. It's important for our DNA synthesis, means making DNA. If we don't have enough iron, we get anemic, we get tired. Remember those commercials way back in the day for Geritol? Wasn't it like iron for blood or something? That's anemia. Signs are definitely fatigue or being tired. Now, there's heme iron and there's non-heme iron. Heme iron is the kind we find in animal products, and it's very easily absorbed. Non-heme iron is the type of iron we find in plant products, and it's not absorbed as easily. But it doesn't mean, as plant-based people, we're not going to get plenty of iron. We really can. We had oxalates on the calcium for iron. We have phytates in our nuts and seeds and grains that might bind the iron, so we don't get as much of it as we possibly could. One thing to really help absorption with iron is to eat a vitamin C rich food when you're eating it. And we do this a lot of times naturally. Let's say I'm making chili and I'm throwing my beans in it, which are a good source of iron, and I'm also throwing some tomatoes in, which are a vitamin C rich food. It's going to help the absorption of my iron. You can also cook in a cast iron skillet, which a lot of us do, and that helps you actually get a little iron from that. But making sure you're having fruits and or vegetables at every meal, they're going to have some vitamin C. You're going to be able to get better absorption from the food you eat. Vegetarians tend to store less iron, and that actually might be a good thing, because as we get older, iron can become what they call a pro-oxidant. So it can actually start causing some damage. So we really don't need as much as we get older. Especially we ladies, you know, it's higher when we're menstruating and we're losing blood every month, but when we quit doing that, we don't need to have as much iron. And you'll see the difference in a lot of our vitamins. If you get a Centrum or a regular multivitamin, and then they have the silver version, the silver doesn't have the iron in it because we don't need it as much anymore. Coffee, sorry, that didn't make sense there, but coffee and tea can decrease calcium absorption. So it's good not to always have coffee and tea at, oh, sorry, gosh, I thought I was on calcium. Sorry, maybe Linda, you can edit this part out. Coffee, tea, and calcium decrease the absorption of your iron. So you don't always want to have your coffee or tea or a glass of milk at your meal times. That's what that meant. Sorry, got a little confused. So our sources, beans and legumes and whole grains, is where we're going to get our iron. It's fortified in some of our cold cereals. We really get plenty if we're having our beans and legumes and grains, which hopefully we're all getting. Here shows some iron content of certain foods. We can see that spinach and chard, pretty big. And then we got our oats and rice. Now, this isn't enriched. This really isn't a fair comparison, because enriched means they added iron back after they stripped all the iron out of it. So that's not really a fair comparison. There's our soy milk, tempeh, fermented soy. They got some nuts, some dried fruits like figs and raisins. A lot of our cold cereals are enriched with iron, so they have plenty of iron in it. And there's that molasses. again. I just had a recipe that called for molasses. Oh, gingerbread. I was going to try to make. Okay, zinc. Men, you need a little more than we women. This helps our enzymes do their jobs they're supposed to do in our body. So all the functions that help keep us going, we need zinc for. It helps with wound healing. A lot of times if you're in the hospital or you're having a surgery, they're going to give you a supplement of zinc to help with your wound healing. And also, sorry, this moved over. I'm moving this over, our taste perception. I'm moving that up. So a lot of times when people, as they age, maybe they lose their sense of taste a little bit, we recommend trying zinc to see if that will help. If you don't have enough, you tend to get sick more often. Your immunity isn't as good. You might lose some hair. You lose your sense of taste or smell. Half of the zinc intake in the US is from meats, though. So vegetarians might need a little bit more than just the standard RDA, which is for the typical American. Again, those phytates can inhibit our absorption. So our sources are going to be, if we're animal foods, we're going to get it from that. But our fortified cereals, there's our whole grains, our beans, our tofu, our nuts and seeds. Really, so many of the things that we're already eating on a whole food plant-based diet. So it's not a common deficiency. And here's folate. This one is very important for our DNA. Again, a lot of these have been involved in our DNA synthesis, making new cells, including red blood cells, and breaking down homocysteine. So homocysteine, a high level of that in our bloodstream, has been associated with higher risk of heart disease. So what folate does is help to break down the homocysteine so it doesn't build up. So if we don't have enough, you get anemia. So this is an iron deficiency anemia. This is a different anemia. So this is anemia that is a folate deficiency anemia. You get tired, you might get weak. It has been associated with neural tube defects, which is a birth defect. In fact, back in the 90s, they added folate to a lot of our grain products to help decrease the risk of neural tube defects. And also, if we have a deficiency, we might have elevated homocysteine, which is associated with heart problems. So when you think folate, though, from foods, we're going to get plenty, because think foliage. So we think of any of our greens, think beans, whole grain seeds, the basis of our plate for a whole food plant-based diet. So it's generally not a problem at all. And iodine, because it comes from the sea and a lot of our sources are seafood, can be a risk for somebody with whole food plant-based diet. Our day is about 150 micrograms. It is part of our thyroid hormones. So it helps regulate our growth and our metabolic rate. And if we get a deficiency, what we get is either hypothyroid, where we have a sluggish thyroid, or we might even get a goiter. You know, when I was in school, they show all the pictures of all the things that happen to you when you have a deficiency. And so, you know, a goiter is a kind of a growth. And normally nowadays we would catch that early enough. I know my sister had a bit of a goiter when she had problems with her thyroid. But because we get it in iodized salt and seafood and dairy products that many of us are not eating, we could get it from sea vegetables like seaweed, nori, kombu. Kombu is edible kelp, or plants that are in a soil that's iodine rich, which of course we don't know if that is. But I've lately been into the nori, making some sushi rolls, or even eating the nori as a little snack. Or if you go, that's what the little, I think that the kombu, I think, is the thing on the right. But they sell snacks of just the seaweed. Also, the little seaweed salad you see right there, that's what you might get if you go to, you know, Makuni's or Japanese place. I've not made that myself. I would like to try that. Uh-oh. Here's our nutrients to consider for COVID, which hopefully COVID is getting behind us. But I've been following this guy, chrisbeatcancer.com, and he really is promoting the vitamin D3. He said, you know, based on the research that 80% of COVID patients are deficient in D3. He recommends 4,000 international units a day. And you can get that in the pill form in the vitamin D3, the vegan portion. It nearly doubled the survival rate in nursing homes in one study. Vitamin C may help because it can help reduce your symptoms from COVID, just like, you know, we think of vitamin C for the common cold. Zinc seems to be associated with reduced symptoms and also help to improve our immune system. So there's a few things that should move over there that can help with COVID. All right, so there's many more micronutrients, but I talked about the ones that tend to be more of a challenge for people who are eating a whole food plant-based diet. So how are you going to put this into play? Well, we're going to follow our plate. You have maybe 3 fruits a day, 4 or more vegetables. So every time we sit down, we're going to have a fruit and or vegetable at every meal. We're going to have a fruit and or vegetable as a snack. Have whole grains, a portion of our plate. You know, a serving is about half a cup. So you can have 5 a day of those. Or try to have a little starch at every meal. And then protein, I try to have a little protein source at every single meal so that we make sure we're getting, if we're doing all that, and if we're having enough calories to maintain a healthy weight. So even if you're losing weight, but you're losing to a healthier weight, we're going to do fine in our nutrients. So to maximize the nutrients that we get from the foods we eat, we want to eat all these things multiple times a day, like we just said. But with vegetables, include your dark greens too. With fruits, eat it with the skin if you can, because you're going to lose nutrients if we peel it. Have beans, lentils, split peas multiple times a day. Have nuts and seeds a few times a day. Eat whole intact grains a few times a day. So remember, that's going to be like brown rice as opposed to white rice or rice-a-roni, or barley as opposed to, I don't know, I can't think of any other kind of lame grain, but have the whole intact grain: barley, millet, amaranth, farro, freekeh. There's just so many out there, and we tend to eat all the same things. And add herbs and spices to everything because we get a lot of nutrients from those. Plus, we get those powerful antioxidants. What else do we have? I've shown you this before, so this isn't new to you. But if we're trying to plan a good, well-balanced meal or meals, and think about what you're going to have this week, and cook a few things in advance. Cook up some extra oatmeal. Cook up some extra beans. Cook up some quinoa or brown rice for a favorite grain, or try a new grain. Cook a few sweet potatoes so you can have them multiple times this week. Roast a bunch of veggies so you can eat those and throw those on top of your meals. Cut your veggies into shapes you're going to need for the week. So dice or slice, cut them into sticks for snacks. So you see multiple little shapes there. But that's going to make it easier so you don't have to be cooking every single meal, because that can get very exhausting. And now I know a lot of you, I like to eat like a bowl. I call this a power bowl. Some you'll hear it called Buddha bowl. I love this eating style. I'm afraid this is what I do all the time. So I cook all those things in advance. So I'm ready to have dinner tonight. So I'm going to go in there and see, well, I might cook up some kale that I didn't cook the other day, or I might have my leftover chili and put it on a pile of raw kale and microwave that to heat it up. But if I've already done my sweet potatoes, I've already done my quinoa, so I see that in my picture. I have already cooked some beans there. And then maybe I'm going to cook up a few vegetables that I have, or I'm going to eat them raw. And then I'm going to throw a protein source on. If I didn't have my beans, I might have some tofu or something. And I think that is the prettiest thing. And then you're eating different foods. And then I'm going to sprinkle some of my nuts or my pumpkin seeds on top of that. And maybe I'll have a dressing or a sauce on top of it. So that makes for a great filling meal, I think. So whatever you pre-cook, you've got it to eat all week by throwing it in these bowls. Or maybe we're going to have a better salad. So have a better salad. We're going to have darker greens. We're going to have any of your favorite veggies. We're going to add some leftover greens or veggies that we have that we already cooked. Maybe you're going to put some fruit on it. Now we've got mandarins coming back in. Persimmons are excellent on our salads. You can maybe add a protein, some beans, some tofu, some lentils, maybe try that tempeh, Sprinkle nuts on it, add a dressing, keep it on the side if it's a higher fat dressing so you can dip in it. And now you got a great salad. You've got a meal, not just a salad. And then now it's soup season, of course. So there's very few things I can do without a recipe. But this is a super easy way to make soup without a recipe. So you start with what they call your aromatics, which are going to be your onions, garlic. You can throw carrots and celery in there. You throw in your pan, saute that up. Then I'm going to add a few other veggies, maybe mushrooms or cauliflower, squash, whatever I've got in the fridge. I'm going to throw that in there. Then I'm going to throw some beans, can of beans, or I have some cooked beans that I have in the freezer. I'm going to put those in there and do a low sodium vegetable broth, and you cook it. And then at the end, add your seasonings of choice. But you know what? I found it hardly needs seasoning. I don't know why. You got all these other great flavors. And at the end, I throw in a couple cups of my raw greens until they get wilty. And now I've got a soup. And then I made enough. Now I can freeze it so I can have it for lunch or dinner for the next month. So I think that's kind of all I've got. So the food you eat can be the safest form of medicine or the slowest form of poison. So you got to really think about how much this is worth to you. And that's why I put remember your why. There's a reason why you're showing up to our talks, you're coming to the exercise, you're changing your diet and your lifestyle. And always remember that, because when you think, I am getting sick of doing this cooking, or those commercials are making that bad food look so good. Remember why you're doing this. For me, I want to do it for health. I want to live longer and be healthier as I get older and still have so many more things I want to do. So that's my why. So when things fall back to the typical American diet, the standard American diet or SAD diet, as they call it, I got to think that's my slowest form of poison. I don't need it. So, and you're in the best group because you got a bunch of people who are like-minded, thinking like you do, who want to do these things and can be your best educators and help you with ideas and recipes and everything. So eat as if your life depended on it because, well, yes, it does. And stay healthy and happy Vegan Month. And thank you for putting up with my recording. And thank you, Linda, for making arrangements for it. I'm going to stop sharing right now, and I'll see you guys in a few weeks.